Good morning, welcome to Football-Oranje podcast number 36, live from Amsterdam. And joining me in this wonderful city that I call home on this very special pod on location is Michael Statham. Good morning, Michael.
Morning, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Welcome, and welcome for your third pod here on location, because we also had a location pod in The Hague not so long ago last season. So nice for you to be back.
Yeah, I'm loving it. The weather's not the best at the moment.
He brought the weather with him, listeners.
From the UK. Yeah, so we've got loads to talk about, haven't we, again?
Yep.
As usual. And I think our main topics this week are going to be covering the Champions League.
Yep.
The great news for Dutch clubs in Europe.
Yep.
PSV and Ajax getting wins.
Yep.
The Netherlands, the squad's out for the games against Peru and France. And we've got loads more questions in as well. It's going to be another good podcast.
It certainly will be.
So let's start in chronological order. This week we've had wins for PSV and Ajax in the Champions League. If both make it to the group stage of the Champions League, it's going to be terrific for the Dutch coefficient, massive for the ramifications of the future of Dutch football.
Yep.
And yeah, so PSV beat Bate Borisov from Belarus 3-2. Did you see the game?
I saw the highlights of the match.
I saw the match.
I saw that Van Bommel was very pleased that he spoke beforehand about Bate Borisov being a competent team that have played more regular Champions League football than what PSV have done in recent years. I think it's a good result. It's a well-timed shot in the arm that both Dutch clubs have managed to get positive results. I think the second leg will be slightly easier for Ajax than PSV. I know that PSV are playing at home, but it's the two goals that Bate Borisov have. I'm still confident that both will make it to the group stage. I think it will be a very timely boost, and as you rightly say, the ramifications going forward in terms of pre-qualifying rounds for other European Dutch sides.
Yeah, if we are going to talk about the ramifications, some people tend to ask about the coefficient. Just quickly, the Netherlands are currently sitting 13th in the league rankings, and it's important that they reach either the top 10 or 11th in the league rankings as the best leagues in Europe. Decide the Champions League, Europa League places. If they reach 11th, they get the automatic place back. Usually it's top 10, but the winner's usually one of the top 10 leagues, so it opens up 11th place. Top 12 helps for Europa League qualifying rounds as well. So we're hoping that they have a good season. And PSV played a very good game. Hervin Latsani was terrific. We're seeing some good quality play from PSV again, but they had an awful beginning to the game.
Yeah,
awful defending.
I've been saying for years that the gap between seasoned European clubs and smaller European clubs is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. If you go through the Champions League qualifying results and the Europa League qualifying results with a fine-tooth comb, you will see teams that you haven't necessarily heard before, specifically away victories for smaller teams. And that comes due to the professionalism of the league and the ramifications of determinations and the heart and the fight, because these smaller teams that are playing European football, they want to represent their country, not just themselves, not just their team. They're not thinking about, the fatigue of Thursday to Sunday. They're thinking about the opportunity to play in Europe for the first time, in some cases ever, and they want to take that opportunity to the best of their ability and show what their team and their club is all about.
Do you not think, though, that it's almost a bit embarrassing that teams like PSV could be turned over? I mean, we saw it with RZ and Feyenoord, getting beaten by much smaller teams with much less money, and that's the key thing. If you're going to spend money, you've got to be a stronger team, and then you have to win these games. There's almost no excuse, do you not think?
I think you make some valid points, but you've got to be selective in terms of what you're spending your money on. I mean, I know this is a pod about Dutch football, but just to give you an example of the Premier League, if you think of how many Premier League teams have spent astronomical amounts of money, but yet 3 of them are still going to get relegated come the end of the season.
Yeah. Okay. The quality did tell in the end. PSV, they tired Bate out and got the goals that they needed for an away win. So that was one win, and I think they should see it out in the return leg. As for Ajax, they blew Dynamo Kiev away 3-1, and it wasn't as convincing, of course, as the Standard Liège 3-0. Kiev are another level up from that. A very good team, but arguably not as strong as they were 4 to 5 years ago. But then again, Ajax are also stronger than the team that were there 4 to 5 years ago. We're actually sitting right next to the stadium. We can see it here. We're going to be watching the Emmen game later. So, Ajax, what did you think of the win?
Very good win. The most pleasing thing for me was, Michael, is having been to previous European games in recent years against Nice and Rosenborg in particular last season, is that they've learned from that experience. for example, the match against Nice at home. Nice were fantastic and looked great, and Ajax were keeping them at arm's length, and then the second away goal came and it changed the complex of the match. But Ajax appear to have learned in a mature sense in terms of seeing out games and game management, and that's a fantastic attitude to have going forward, because the Champions League people will, should they reach the Champions League, people will rightly write them off. But again, you just don't know, do you? You saw the images of the supporters before the Dynamo Kiev game, where they were all where we are now. This area was packed. Supporters letting off flares and going bananas because
they loved it.
It's pride.
Yeah.
And also as well, I wonder if a team, there's certain destinations in Europe, like a Milan, like an Amsterdam, like a Lisbon, where if you're lucky enough to be a professional footballer and you're going to play football in those wonderful stadiums here in Johan Cruyff Arena, San Siro and Stadio de Luz, when you're playing in those wonderful stadiums, it must give you a massive thrill, even for an opponent, to know that for Benfica going away to Ajax or even into Milan. I remember when they came here in 2006 with Figo and Cambiasso, and it was a wonderful 2-2 game where Ajax just blew them away in the first 30 minutes, and with home advantage they can make life difficult for many a European team. The same goes for PSV too.
Yeah, certainly the same can be said for me as well. Ajax have certainly matured with the way that they're seeing out the games. It's far better than it has been, but then at the same time they did say that in the away match against Kiev, they're not going to be sitting back, because that's not the way they play, and that is such a good philosophy to have. But at the same time, they need to be sensible in this away leg to make sure they get it through to the Champions League group stage. But they're going to do it their own way.
I think so. This, Europe represents massive pride. I mean, we're sitting outside a stadium of a club which has won the Champions League 4 times, and you can't erase history. People talk about big clubs in this day and age, and what constitutes a big club. History plays a massive part in that. And Ajax are the biggest club in the Netherlands. 1 in 4 Dutch people are supporters of Ajax, and it's just a great club, and they'll be really looking forward to the second leg in Kiev.
For sure. Last time we didn't get to Gareth's question, but this week we're going to start off with one of his questions that he sent in on Twitter. Could the signing of Dusan Tadic and keeping hold of Hakim Ziyech be the difference between a successful season or an indifferent season for Ajax, both in the Eredivisie and Europe? Their midweek performance against Kiev suggests that to me.
Yeah, I think he's absolutely right. I think it's a shot in the arm. I think it's wonderful for Tadic that he's chosen to leave the Premier League, because I think he would have been confronted with 20-minute cameos and potentially fighting relegation, and now he's on the verge of playing Champions League football. And I was here for the game against Sturm Graz where he made his debut, and the crowd really got behind him. Same for Daley Blind as well, and again for him as well. I think for him it's the little things. It's being able to represent his country in Serbia. It's being able to play Champions League football. He's a very smart individual, and it's nice to see players leaving the Premier League for the Eredivisie. It doesn't happen very often. I think we'll see it happening more often as time goes on, because I think Premier League clubs are in the business at the moment of stockpiling players, and of course you can't do that.
Not players that are 35 as well and seeing out their career.
Exactly.
28 and 29. That's a terrific age to be coming back to the Eredivisie. It sends out a good message.
It certainly does. Especially
to those younger Ajax players such as Matthijs de Ligt.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can stay at this club and I can get better. I can improve. I can play massive games.
Well, de Ligt is now captain. And what a responsibility for someone so young. You would hope that with the responsibility given to him and the maturity he's shown when speaking to the Dutch media in particular, that he's not going to leave at for the first club that comes in. I hope personally, if he does eventually leave, that he goes to Bayern Munich, because I think Bayern Munich would look after him. I don't necessarily think that other big hitters in world football would look after him. If you look at the way Bayern Munich have looked after Robben through the years, and how long he's played for Bayern Munich, and what he's given to them, and what Bayern Munich has given to Robben. If De Ligt was to use that as a template for him going forward in his career in future seasons, I think that would be very wise indeed.
Great. We had another question to do with Ajax before we move on, and we'd just like a quick injury update. Cam would like to know what's up with Dolberg, Neres, Czerny and Sinkgraven. Some of the players haven't quite been as there haven't been many updates about how they're getting on really. So just thought we'd share a little bit of news on that. David Neres, first of all, could be back next week. Vaclav Černy's going to be back after the winter break. Sinclair's unknown at the moment. He's been out for ages, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Veltman's going to be back after the winter break. Same for Hassan Bonde, and Dolberg is touch and go.
Yeah.
I think we're not sure at the moment when he's going to be back.
Yeah, well, he also had that injury last season which kept him out for 3 months.
Yeah.
And also, as I've stated before on the podcast, I think if your deadline day potentially to Monaco falls through, I think that does something to you as a player in terms of, although you might be really happy, the progress he could have made at a club like Monaco. And I've been a fan of Monaco for years. People associate them with just money, but if you look at their philosophy and their buying policy, many clubs could learn from it, because it's just so refreshing and just so careful and just so also very simple. I think it's something that needs to be lauded.
Okay, we've talked about the Dutch teams in Europe for this week. Let's move on to talk about the Netherlands. So one of the hot topics for Dutch football fans at the moment is that the squad's out for the first matches of the season for the national team. How exciting, we got it back. And the big news is that Frenkie de Jong's got his call up. What do you think? Do you think he should be in the squad?
The main squad?
Yes.
No.
And starting a match as well?
No.
No?
No. I think it's quite apparent and a very good decision that he's in the preliminary squad to give him a taste of what's to come. I think it's a very sensible decision from Koeman. But I think to put him in the main squad for these games, I'm not entirely sure. I have stated before about how apparent and how consistent Brian Linssen is. Brian Linssen has been consistent for the last 3 or 4 years, and he's so decisive in terms of chipping in with goals. But if I was Koeman, I would look to cap Brian Linssen before I cap Frenkie de Jong. With Linssen as well, I followed him since his VVV Venlo days. He's a tremendous player, and you see how he's gone from VVV, Groningen, Heracles, making a step up all the time. And I think it would send out a huge message if players, also as Dumfries as well, he's had a fantastic start to the season. Koeman will be wise to mix it up, to give the domestic players here also a sign that they are in the frame for eventual call-ups. Frenkie de Jong is a tremendous player, and he'll go on to have a very fine career. I mean, there's already overtures from Barcelona. He was quite quiet when being questioned by the Dutch media, but you know, he's still very young. He's got a fantastic future ahead of him. If he doesn't get capped in these 2 games, it's not the end of the world. The cap will come sooner rather than later. I just look from a point of view in the case of Brian Linssen, where he's been so consistent for so long that people think, oh, because he plays for Vitesse, he can't be capped. He should be capped. I really hope that this season, 2018-2019, we're seeing capped at some point.
I can see your argument. I'm going to give it from both sides. If you've got the likes, though, of Ryan Babel, Berghuis, Steven Bergwijn, Depay, Elia, Kluivert, Promes, they're all wingers that could be viewed as a better player than Linssen because of where they've been playing. But again, people also say that Linssen's perhaps one of the best right wingers in the Netherlands playing in there at the moment. And Steven Berghuis has had an off the boil start to the season. He hasn't been at his best, but obviously last season his goals and assists were very good. I can see the argument for Linssen. As for Frenkie de Jong, in my opinion, I think he should be in the squad, and he should be starting that friendly against Peru, because he's playing with Wesley Sneijder. It's going to be the last chance he gets to play with Sneijder as well, the first and last, because it's Schneider's farewell appearance against Peru. Yeah, the game against France perhaps comes too early. Yeah. That friendly, I think de Jong needs to start and get that taste.
But that friendly is not just a farewell game for Sneijder. Koeman wants to use it to the best of his ability, because he's got to mould a team which is competitive. I also think it's very telling that the Carabao have chosen to move the destination of the match against France in November from Amsterdam to Rotterdam. Our colleague Michael Bell, who often stated in previous pods that he would like to see that happen more often, I think that was a fantastic point from Michael, and I think the Carabao have heeded that, because you'll get the atmosphere of the Galp, and that might help them to eke out a positive result against the world champions in November.
Yeah, it's going to be some good games coming up for the Nations League. A question from Hamza. Do you think it's time for Nathan Ake to be a starter in the back three for the Netherlands? Because they tend to play a back three centre-backs. Is it time for Ake to be part of that? And perhaps, he said, ahead of Daley Blind?
I think he's got a very good point. I think Ake also scoring in the previous international match. It was a fantastic header as well against the Italians, and he's done very well. You know, Bournemouth are always punching above their weight, and he's took to Premier League football like a duck to water. I see no reason why he shouldn't be starting in future internationals. I think if he was to get a transfer to, with all due respect, a bigger club, I think he'd be more in the frame to start more regularly for the Dutch national team, to be honest.
Arguably the same goes for Patrick van Aanholt in that respect too, because he's one of the finest left backs in the Premier League.
He's had a wonderful, wonderful start to the season. I think people are rightly very, very positive about Crystal Palace. I remember speaking to former Ajax player Demi Houston about his time at Fulham when he played under Roy Hodgson, and he said about how much he believes in young players. And I think in the case of Hodgson, showing the belief he showed in Houston many years ago by also telling him to go on loan to a Finnish club to get experience, I think Hodgson's man management ability is now rubbing off on Van Aanholt and Crystal Palace in general.
I'd just like to talk quickly about Matthijs de Ligt. He's one that gets covered a lot on our website, but I think it's good to put out there that, you know, for the Netherlands, if he starts alongside Virgil van Dijk, he's almost a shoo-in already at centre-back. You know, think back to that horrendous debut he had against Bulgaria, where he should never have played. They lost 2-0. His mistakes cost them the game. And then I looked this up, exactly a year later, he played that friendly against Portugal where they won 3-0. He marked Cristiano Ronaldo out of that game, a world-class performance. How much did he come on, you know, in that short space of time?
I fully agree, Michael, but also sort of maturity. When you listen to him speak to the Dutch media, you wouldn't think that this is a boy of 19. Even in terms,
just turned 19 as well.
Yeah, even in terms of his vocabulary and what he's actually saying. You would expect this to come from a player who's been playing football for maybe 10 to 12 years, never mind someone who's been playing for only 2. I think I agree with you on the Bulgaria one, especially away from home. I think it's very telling that when you start a particularly young player in international, it's always best to give them the home debut and then take it from there. I think you've either got to be brave, or in some cases a little bit stupid, to select someone that young for an away fixture.
And such a key crucial qualifier, not even a friendly.
Exactly. When that draw was made, that was the first thing that stuck out to me, was the difficult away days in Paris, Solna and Sofia. And that's similar to the European games, really, where you've got to really accept countries and European teams for what they are. But he's come on so well. It would just be such a shame if he does continue to do so well. His choice for his next club in the next 2 or 3 seasons will be, I know it might sound obvious, but it's the most important choice of his career. And I hope that he chooses a Bayern Munich that will look after him. And then once he's had that, then he can go on to maybe perhaps another league and shine even more.
Agreed. Another question from Jordan, bringing us back to Daley Blind. He wants to know what his best position is. Where do you think Blind should play? He thinks he should play central defensive midfield. I don't think he has the pace to play left back or centre back.
He has had his moments at left back. I mean, you look at the World Cup.
Good or bad?
Mixture. But I mean, that cross he gave for Van Persie in 2014.
We'll never forget it. One of the most famous goals ever.
Fantastic. And he's very much a confidence player. I mean, you saw coming back here, he was like a kid at Christmas when he was speaking to Dutch media by saying, "I'm so happy to be back. It's so wonderful to be back." It shows how quickly things can go in football. I remember when I first moved to this country and he was put on loan to Groningen, and there was question marks about him.
Yeah, and then he played for Ajax as well, and then even more questions.
For Manchester United, so it just goes to show you never know what's going to happen in football, and just enjoy it for what it is. And but you can see fruits of the labour of Koeman coming in slowly but surely. And due to the, as listeners will know, the messiness behind the scenes, this was always going to be a long old road, and we will get back there, and that will be the combination of playing in a major tournament again, fingers crossed, Euro 2020. But it's a long old road, and we're finally starting to see shoots of that.
Yeah. As for Blind, he's playing at centre back for Ajax now, and Andre Onana, the Ajax goalkeeper, praised him for his distribution from centre back, and he said he takes no risks, and that's positive to hear. But as for left back, I don't think he can play in that position
No,
much more.
pace.
A centre back is perhaps his best position playing for Ajax. I'm not sure about the Netherlands because he lacks it in the air. And aerial duels, they know to put the big tall striker up against De Blind because he loses a lot of aerial duels. And it's unsure actually, isn't it, where he should play really, because he's a good player, but where is the best position for Koeman's team?
He's an old-fashioned utility player. Just to give some information, we're talking about transfers. Earlier this week, I read that Olympique Marseille were in for Onana, and I think that's arguably the biggest club in France. So that wouldn't be a bad move for him. I read this morning reports on local media that the family of Hervin Lozano has stated that he will stay in the Netherlands for 1 more year. So it's looking likely that next summer will be his move. I think that's a good move for PSV, that's a good move for him, and be interesting to see what happens.
Indeed. As for the striking options for Netherlands, we talked about the defensive options. Calls this week that Luke de Jong's back in the squad, PSV striker. He's often comes in for a lot of criticism when he gets play for the Netherlands. Him and Weghorst, though, are the only 2 recognised strikers in the squad. Are they there to be linchpins, the big tall hitters, if they're losing a game, and to be brought off the bench? Or are these guys really going to be starting and a player's going to be around them? How do you think Koeman's going to use these strikers, if at all?
I think he may well use the first option, perhaps. I think with Weghorst as well, he's just recently secured a transfer to Wolfsburg. When you come into a new environment and a new dressing room, you've got to take time to adapt. So I think he will, I'm sure he's getting on very well, but I think he will enjoy coming back to a dressing room that he knows, to an international setup that he knows. And I think we'll see him be perhaps a little bit more looser. He's made tremendous strides from his days at Heracles when people questioned what he could actually do. He was like a glorified battering ram in some cases. He was linked with Cardiff City when he was at Heracles, done so well at AZ, and has now secured a transfer to a very good Bundesliga side who were almost relegated last season but managed to escape in the German relegation playoffs.
And at the age of 26 as well,
a good age
making
as
that
well.
move.
A good age.
A little bit later than you'd expect.
But it's still a decent move.
But a very good move.
Joshua Berenet has also signed for Hoffenheim. We see more Dutch players going to Germany. But
Absolutely.
For me, it's just my opinion, Michael. Every single professional player, regardless of level, you must always, I'm sure there's always a bit of luck involved, but you must always look very carefully at your options and try to decide what's best for you. If you look at the players that have done that, especially abroad, they've all had fine careers, and that's no coincidence.
Question for you, James. How do you think the Netherlands are going to beat France in the Nations League qualifier, group stage match? It's going to be difficult to beat them. They're the world champions. How does Koeman go about it? Is he going to rely on Memphis Depay to bring that bit of magic?
Could do. If I was up against Didier Deschamps and the world champions, might be a bit negative, and obviously I'm not negative in terms of playing style, but I would go, even in Rotterdam, the Kuip, 5-4-1, because if you have a 0-0 draw or you don't get beat by the world champions, that can be considered a good result. If you look what happened when they went to Paris in the World Cup qualifiers, got beat 4-0. This is a French side with so much movement. I was fortunate enough to be in Tallinn for the UEFA Cup Super Final, and I watched Griezmann, and I'm just in awe of that player. He's just absolutely tremendous when he hasn't got the ball, not just in terms of verbal communication, but also gesticulating to his players where he's going to run. And if you look at the space he runs into, it could be a sprint of 5 yards, 8 yards, could be a check back.
So how do a Dutch deal with that?
The man has a brain. The man has a brain, and he uses it at every given opportunity. I think that obviously France have 11 players, but Griezmann is so important to them that they've got to look to have. If you have a 5-man defence, you can at least have 2 that keep an eye on him. Keep an eye on him solidly, because he can get away from someone, draw a free kick.
It's not just him as well, though. You've got Mbappe in the wing.
Exactly. Mbappe. You've got Pogba and Kante, who never ever stops running. This is a golden age for France, and sometimes you just got to come up against a better team. And people might say that 5-4-1 is negative, but they've got to keep a handle somewhere, because you're facing the 2 previous world champions in a qualifying nations group, and it's going to be a tough ask. But if you can pick up points at home, even if it's just 1 point, and you don't lose, it will show signs of progress.
Are we already looking for Koeman to hope that it's a bit of an off day for France.
Possibly, but I think there's so much togetherness in that squad. You know, you see the fun with, the setup when they come together. You know, they all have fun, and the videos on social media where they're just in fits of laughter. I was fortunate enough to be in the Europa League final in Lyon between Atletico and Marseille, and when Dimitri Payet got injured and was subbed off, the man was in tears. Wasn't just in tears because he bows out of a European final. He was also in tears because he knows he's going to miss the World Cup with his country, which has got a fantastic chance of winning it, which they did.
So that's coming up in the next couple of weeks, the Netherlands fixtures, and we look forward to watching those.
Yeah.
I'd like to finish this week's podcast with a couple of questions
Yeah.
that aren't necessarily to do with the things we've been talking about today.
Yeah.
And the first one's from Jordan. Do you think Sparta Rotterdam can achieve promotion from the Eerste Divisie to the Eredivisie? They've brought in lots of players and have a good manager in Henk Fraser.
Yeah. That's a very good question. I will always tip my hat to good questions that come in, and we appreciate them all. They have brought many players, including the former Den Haag player Edouard Duplan, who I interviewed for Football-Oranje, I think last April before last. Henk Fraser does have experience, but it's a tough league. This year it's a very tough league with NEC Nijmegen, FC Twente, RKC Waalwijk,
Roda.
Roda JC with Molenaar, who I also interviewed, and also
and young Ajax can't get promoted, but they're also a tough team.
As well. It's a real slog. It's a real slog. They have a chance, but I think it's a bit too early to say about a championship. If I was to say one team who we haven't mentioned in that row of teams that I think are going to do very well, Go Ahead Eagles. And John Statham,
yeah.
I think he's a very underrated manager. He used to play for Go Ahead. People criticised him in some quarters for taking a step back, but he's taking a step back because he wants to achieve with that club, and I think he will.
Yeah, I personally don't think Henk Fraser's had a great start to management with Vitesse. Yeah. He's really got to turn it on with Sparta. I think there's a bit of pressure there actually to get it right.
It's a long old season. I mean, they had Dick Advocaat who wanted to save them. They had Alex Pastor before that, who was getting a little bit too much ahead of himself. But yeah, it's a long old season, you know, and I would say that Go Ahead.
And Royston Genta's back as well.
Yeah, but they are the oldest club in the Netherlands, and they are highly respected. Every time they get promoted to the Eredivisie, there's always media attention on them. The stadium is a lovely stadium. It's a club which means a lot to many Dutch football fans, even if they're not a fan of Sparta.
Yeah, everyone loves Sparta Rotterdam. There's no one that hates Sparta Rotterdam.
Absolutely, never a truer word spoken.
Okay, and the final question this week. What do you think of Nemanja Gudeli's move to Sporting Lisbon? Do you think he was appreciated at Ajax?
In some quarters, yes and no. I think his move to China turned maybe a couple of people against him. You can understand why he went, but I also think if you look in hindsight, it's a very smart decision from him. He's earned a lot of money in China, and now he's arguably at one of the biggest clubs in Sporting Lisbon. Yes, they have problems with their fans at the back end of last season, but it's a decent league. Tonight is actually Sporting Lisbon, Benfica against Sporting Lisbon in the Stadio da Luz, so that will be interesting. And I've also been on the tour of the Sporting Lisbon Stadium in the past, and it was a lovely stadium, and they're full of pride. You know, they have one of the sayings on the stands, which is translates into "Be proud of your own race," meaning that their supporters group they view in terms of a race that they're so proud of, and it's a very, very big club, a bit of a different club, but one that definitely has something to offer.
I think you can see through Gudeli's move back to Europe is that he's been sort of pushed out Gonzalo Evergrande because I think they had too many foreign players, is what I could tell from the squad.
Maybe.
And they don't like having too many foreign players. But so it's interesting to see players moving back to Europe, and you've seen it a few times now. Players moving back from China. I think it was a bit of a flash in the pan, that league. I think it will start to. The money's there, but I don't think it's going to be what they want it to be.
I wonder as well. I can understand in Beijing and Shanghai that you have time to enjoy the city and get into the swing of things. But if you're playing, China is a massive, huge country. But if you're playing in the middle of nowhere, where you haven't necessarily got the infrastructure to go out and live the city life, like, I mean, maybe I'm a bit of an old romantic, but if I had to choose a club, where you live is very important. You know, like I've been living in Amsterdam for 12 years. I don't want to leave this country in the city for love nor money. But you never know what's going to happen in the future, and should a club show overtures in a press way of things, I would have to take my time and have a think about it. But I would still look at the club, study the club, and particularly the city where it is, because it's very important. You bring as much time through off the pitch than on it, and it's important to be happy both on the pitch and off the pitch as well.
And I think, as a final note to this week's podcast, as we are live in Amsterdam, it is a beautiful country to come visit and watch the football, because it's the third time I've come and done it, and it's amazing. Yeah, it's I've been fortunate enough to live a third of my life in this country, and I'm just this journey started for me with an Arsenal European away day in February 2003. I know a few listeners like to listen to this podcast and have gone to us, have you give us a bit of advice, because we've been inspired by what what we do on our website, and we want to come visit the country for the football. Now that's terrific to hear.
Absolutely.
Is anyone else?
Yeah, absolutely. We are open to helping any football fan who wants to come and watch a football game here. You can follow Michael on at Eredivisie Mike. You can follow me on @JamesRowe_NL, and should you have any questions, however silly you think they are, just send them through and we'll try our best to help you.
Yeah, and same goes for any questions for future podcasts.
Absolutely.
Feel free to send them in.
And the recent ones we've got, which have been a little bit off the cuff and different, more of the same, please.
We will look forward to another podcast in a couple of weeks. We've also got a couple of match previews coming for the Netherlands matches in the next couple of weeks. More on that when it comes. Thank you, James.
You're more than welcome, and we're going to enjoy the match tonight.